Sometimes in hockey, you just got to throw logic out the window. And on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, I'm going to tell you why the Oilers are on the precipice of going to the Western Conference Finals again on today's Victory Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Victory Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my second playoff run as the host of Locked On Oilers, my third NHL season with the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been doing hockey content for more than 10 years now, and it's crazy to say that out loud, but I am more than happy to welcome you to the show. If you're an everydayer, glad to see you. If you're new because you want to revel in the victory, welcome aboard. You picked a great time to go. We have a great show on deck. But before we get to today's show, I do want to thank everyone that's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So on today's show, we have a few storylines to tug on. Number one, that was a butt kicking. We are going to start there. We are going to start with the Oilers putting together one of their best performances of the season at a crucial juncture. Our second segment, we are going to talk about the oxymoronic juxtapositional nature of this game and why what Vegas needed to do worked against them in regards to Stuart Skinner playing goalie for the Oilers. And then we tie a bow on this show talking about macro level, what is working so well for the Oilers in this series. So to start things out, no equivocation, no, but whatever. No. I went into this game terrified. The way game 3 ended, I figured talking myself into Stuart Skinner playing well tonight was a fool's errand. Like being in a relationship, that's on the way out, and it's simply a matter of when you're going to have the one last big fight, and then you're going to go your separate ways. That's how I felt about this game going into tonight. I expected Skinner to, that first Vegas goal, to hit you like a knife in the chest, and from there, we would have 1,000 think pieces about how the Oilers failed to improve their goaltending room at the deadline. And instead, the Oilers as a team understood the assignment to the umpteenth degree. That is about as dominating a performance as you are going to see this time of year in the playoffs. And I know Carolina put together a really good performance against Washington earlier in the night, and Washington, to their credit, made the score a little more respectable than Vegas did, but Vegas is a significantly better hockey team than the Capitals, and we know Alex Pietrangelo is hurt. We talked about that on the preview episode of the show, with the crossover preview episode with Chris Gall, about a week ago now, that Pietrangelo was hurt in that Minnesota series. He missed game 1 of this series, and it was a real question as to how effective he would be. But the Golden Knights are a really good hockey team. They won the Pacific Division. They have consistently been amongst the league's best since entering the league 7-8 years ago now. And I expected them to beat the Oilers in this series, and I felt that Vegas's defense, the advantage they had in Adin Hill, and frankly, I liked their forward depth a little bit more. Once you got past their high-end guys, you got a 30-goal season out of Pavel Dorofeyev, for God's sakes. And you look at the Oilers, who struggled to get down the lineup production. And then speaking of down the lineup production, how about Adam Henrique with a pair tonight? That's the type of performance you're going to need if you want to make this happen in the long run. And when we talk about dominating performances, it's one thing to win 3-0, to shut Vegas out, to make the scorecard look ugly. It's another thing to do it the way the Oilers did tonight. 60% of the shots on goal, 60% of the scoring chances, 58% of the high danger chances, and 64% of the expected goals tonight. And that tells you the Oilers had a multifaceted and layer approach. And when the Oilers have been at their best in the playoffs this year, whether we're going to talk about that third period and overtime against LA, you want to talk about game 5 in LA, You want to talk about game one of this series, and then tonight, when the Oilers have been right, it has been a beautiful marriage. And I'm working on something for my Substack, shameless plug here, that we're rebranding, and it's going to be called We're So Back Sports. And I'm slowly putting together how a Stanley Cup championship caliber team needs to play. And one of the conclusions I've started to draw in doing my research, it's not done yet. It probably won't be done until the end of the week, even though I probably should be putting it out sooner. But one of the real big takeaways I am gleaning from my research, and the Oilers are showcasing, you need to have a variety of ways to beat your opponents. It can't just be your big guys eating. It can't just be your depth guys outlasting the other team's depth. It can't just be your special teams. You need a little bit of everything. You need a bit of a smorgasbord approach to building your team and how your team produces. And I think a really good way to describe this is the difference in how high-end players play versus how less skilled players play. And if you want to talk about it in terms of just who plays with who and the style of play they have, it's really, really interesting to watch because the Oilers have different combinations they break out at different game states. And we haven't talked about the lineup changes. Troy Stecher drawing in for Ty Emberson and Victor Arvidsson coming out in favor of Kasperi Kapanen and what those do. And Kapanen, whatever, he's only playing 11, 12 minutes. He's mostly out there for energy to forecheck, to be a pain. He was effective tonight. And I thought Stecher had a couple nice hits. He had the one sequence of Brett Howden where he got the cut across the bridge of his nose. But all in all, you got good performances there. And one thing that really put a smile on my face was third period of this game. The Oilers are protecting the lead. What does Chris Knobloch go to? He goes to old reliable. He breaks out Leon Draisaitl, Kasperi Kapanen, and Vasily Podkolzin to salt this game away. The guy who's a Hart Trophy finalist playing on a line, a top six line with a guy the Oilers claimed off of waivers when they only had 10 healthy forwards, and Vasily Podkolzin, who was playing 10-20 a night last year for the Canucks on their fourth line. And to their credit, in the regular season, when that line was working, the Oilers were playing pretty well from the end of November through early to mid-January. And that line was heavily featured. And you know why? Because Podkolzin is a menace on the forecheck, and so is Kapanen. So what does that do? You put an all-time great playmaker in Draisaitl, who is a better facilitator than he is a shooter. And the guy won the Rocket Richard. That's how good he is. His secondary trait, he won the award for being the best at it. And those guys just funnel him pucks over and over and over again. And in tonight's game, it was more of a salt the game away, where you want to distribute your forecheckers to cycle to burn clock. And that's really the key here. The Oilers can beat you off of the rush. You saw the Evander Kane goal. They can beat you down low. You saw the Adam Henrique goals. And you always have the lurking, like the shark in Jaws. You always have Connor and Leon just out there in the distance. Dun, 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 dun. And at a moment's notice, Connor or Leon can strike. But if that's not there, it's not like years past where that is a fatal flaw, where if they can't score on the power play or if they don't get the one big save. And to be fair, they definitely have needed the one big save at points in some of these games they've lost. But the Oilers have multiple paths to victory, and that is maybe the most enviable position to be in as far as your paths to winning a championship, because you need to be able to win the 5-4 shootout. You need to be able to win the 3-2, 2-1 rock fight. We are going to take our first break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you why, as hard as the Golden Knights tried, they made Stuart Skinner's life really easy tonight. And I'm going to tell you why the Golden Knights overthought things on today's edition of Locked On Oilers right after the break. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? You can crack into a good source of protein today with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you, unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller for longer. Personally, I am a huge fan of the no-shell variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days when I'm here at my desk putting research together, producing the show, or doing the show, or I just need a quick protein fix at the end of the day to hit my macros for the day. They're a great go-to. Or if you're old school and you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein that provides all 9 essential amino acids. So get snacking and get cracking today with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers, as our Edmonton Oilers are up to a 3-1 series lead in the second round against the Vegas Golden Knights. And the closeout game is always the hardest, and we'll talk more about that in the third segment. Right now, I want to eat some crow. Right now, I want to put my hand up and say, Stuart Skinner, my mustache brother, I apologize. I was too pessimistic, I was too negative, and I overthought it to some degree. And I'm going to explain what I mean. Every single person I saw today on YouTube in the comments below the episode from yesterday, I saw on Twitter, I saw on Reddit, I saw in the comment section on The Athletic, every single take was, the Oilers are not going to win if Stuart Skinner is in net for them. I asked the question on our YouTube channel, on the community section, would you consider playing Olivier Rodrigue in a game if Stuart Skinner continued to melt down, if he gave you another uncompetitive game? That's how dire things were here. And when you think about how bad things were coming out of Saturday night, where Skinner's sitting here with an .818 save percentage, he's gotten 3 starts. The worst save percentage of any goalie to make at least 3 playoff starts since 2015, .818. .818 is non-competitive. And if you're Vegas, you're thinking to yourself, we can't give him any easy ones. And the conundrum there becomes a self-defeating cycle. Because the Golden Knights were so preoccupied with looking for that perfect play, for trying to create a really good scoring chance, to pass one extra time, to try and find that really good look to beat Skinner, they started to make his life easier. And some of it, is flow of the game. And as that game gets away from you, you're fighting a little bit harder. You're making mistakes. You're trying to make plays outside of structure. You're starting to break down. That plays into what the Oilers want to do defensively, of course. But I really wanted to hone in on the Skinner of it all, because I think that's the most interesting takeaway from tonight's game. I don't think Skinner was remarkable by any means, but in comparison to what they have gotten from Skinner in the postseason in his previous 3 starts, tonight was nothing short of miraculous. And that is the beauty of the playoffs. That is the beauty of next game. And we talk about this all the time. And I said it a million times during the course of the regular season, where I was really having a hard time believing in Stu. I kept saying over and over again, you got to have a short memory. The next one is the most important save is the next one. And then in the back of my mind, I think about the goal Sam Reinhart scored in the rematch of the Cup final. And I think it was January or February up in Edmonton, where the Oilers made that furious comeback. They got the lead. They blew the lead. Reinhart wins the game, banking a puck in off of Stu. And if I close my eyes right now here on May 13th, I can picture the way his shoulder sank as the red light went on and he realized he let that puck go in. It's not an enviable position. Goalie is arguably the most difficult position in all of sports. And I bring this up all the time. Everydayers have heard me mention this, but if you're new, hello, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad the Oilers are up 3-1, and that coaxed you into listening to some new content. But if you ever go to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, they have an exhibit for the goalies. And there's a quote on the wall. I forget who it's from. Granted, this might not even be there. I haven't been to the Hockey Hall of Fame in like 7 or 8 years at this point. But on the wall there's a quote from a newspaper article, and it says, "This is the only position in all of sports where perfection is the expectation. If you weren't perfect, you didn't do everything you could to help your team win." And we're not ignorant here. We understand that the Oilers are not paying for goaltending. They are rolling the dice on Skinner's upside, and they are rolling the dice on Pickard's relative stability to play passable hockey behind a good team. If they were paying more, I think we could have a more objective conversation about needing more from those guys. And that's why generally after game 3, the topic of conversation wasn't so much that Skinner needs to be better. It was more, how could the Oilers put Skinner in this position? Because we're not stupid. I give hockey fans a lot of credit for their understanding of how important it is to have a general manager and a coach who understand how to get the most out of guys in a way that the other sports, I don't really see that as much. Of course, every sport has smart fans, dumb fans, but I'm speaking from the heart here about hockey fans in the aggregate, who are generally among the more knowledgeable, because hockey is more of a passion niche sport where if you love hockey, you're not afraid to let people know you love hockey. And tonight, with each one of those saves Stuart Skinner made, a little more confidence. And as the game went along, more difficult saves, sharper angles, rebounds, second chances, rush opportunities, and he slowly but surely started to build himself up. And Vegas was being very choosy. They made a real point of emphasis on the broadcast, pointing out that Vegas wasn't shooting even on the power play, where they've been able to gouge the Oilers at times in this series, and they missed opportunities to get in the game. And we say it all the time. If you're an everydayer, you want to finish the sentence for me as you listen, by all means. But if Stuart Skinner needs to be the guy, the Oilers are probably going to have a hard time. If he just needs to be one of the other guys on the team, if Stuart Skinner's impact is comparable to like the 9th or 10th forward, the Oilers can do that. And Skinner still fights it way too much for me to be comfortable. He's got a really bad habit of making himself smaller than he needs to be by going down early to try and put himself in a position to be able to push, to go post to post, because he's not the most athletic guy. But man, tonight, if you're Stuart Skinner, I hope you feel good about that performance. Your team desperately needed something to set the tone. And this was a chaotic game, which frankly, I haven't even talked about 18 minutes in, because that's where my brain is at after that game. And we'll talk about that in the third segment, because I think that's more tied into the bigger picture conversation. But in a game where the first 10 minutes were kind of Thunderdome-y, this game could have gotten silly very fast, and Skinner could have played the part of a clown in that circus. But to his credit, it was Aiden Hill who was the clown in this game. It was Evander Kane who was one of the clowns in this game. And I say that slightly pejoratively. I say that slightly admirably, because emotions are part of the game, and it's a good thing when guys show it, because some guys don't, and it bleeds over into their game. And then you start to talk about apathy, and we're talking about the playoffs. We're talking about the best postseason in all of professional sports. A postseason format in which the Oilers are one win away from getting to the Final Four again. An Oilers team where sometime back in March, I have a TikTok that keeps getting liked and comments on now from sometime back in March, where I said something along the lines of, we got to stop talking about the Oilers as a Stanley Cup contender because of their goaltending and because they have no depth scoring. And here we are, one win away from another conference finals appearance, largely as a byproduct of the depth scoring from guys like Adam Henrique and Evander Kane, and from a really good Stuart Skinner performance on a night they really needed it for the vibes and the energy. Because as hard as it is to track momentum and energy, it is a feeling. As a sports fan, you know what that feels like. And tonight's game has a real opportunity to be a launching pad. And coming up next on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, I'm going to talk about what that launching pad needs to go right. Coming up next, so be sure to stick around. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are breaking down the 3-0 shutout win over the Vegas Golden Knights, in which the Oilers found a way to quell some of their demons, to answer the bell, and to put themselves in the driver's seat. So my big takeaway from tonight, and something that I think I wouldn't have said about last year's Oilers team, this group's kind of nasty. This group has a little bit of that. If you're not watching on YouTube, I just did the backhand of your fingers underneath your chin, which comes from the old country. If you're not European, I'd suggest to look it up because it's affiliated with a word I'm not allowed to use on the show. But the Oilers came into this game with a little bit of an edge to their game. They came into this game tonight saying, we didn't like how game 3 went. We're better than that. We can do something better here. And they got under Adin Hill's skin. I don't think it's a coincidence that Adin Hill kind of lost his cool, and there was a correlation with the Oilers winning this game. And if you want to debate the merits, if you're a Golden Knights fan that's popping in here to see what I have to say about the game, and you want to get on Evander Kane for jumping on Adin Hill, yeah, he did. He got pushed by Braden McNabb. He was already in the air going to jump on Adin Hill when he got pushed. But you know what Evander Kane is. You know what Corey Perry is. You know what Trent Frederick is. You know what Podkolzin is. You know to some degree what Zach Hyman is. And that's the type of identity the Oilers would like to cultivate. They would like to have, as we talked about in that opening segment, a little bit of diversity in how we create. We're not just a rush team. We're not just a cycle team. We're not just a special teams team. We are capable of beating you in a bunch of different ways. And if that means we're going to roll Evander Kane, Zach Hyman, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins as our second line, and we're going to get pucks in deep, we're going to pressure your defenders, we're going to cycle, we're going to go high to low, we're going to force you to defend, we're going to force your goalie to go post to post, we're going to get everybody moving and try and create chaos. If that means we're going to get Henrique and Connor Brown out there to try and recapture the magic from last year and create some rush opportunities, we're going to do that too. And I give all the credit in the world to the Oilers depth guys for doing their part. And coming into this series in particular, I was worried about the Oilers depth guys being able to make up some of the gap, because as you go along in the playoffs, the expectation is that your star players are going to continue to increase in responsibility. Their ice time's going to tick up a little bit. They're going to play more. And by virtue of that, the expectations for them to produce counting stats wise, to produce game control, to produce offensive zone time, to limit the chances against, all of that becomes more magnified the later you go in the playoffs, because you're going to assume that the further you go in the playoffs, the other team's stars are going to get better with each passing round. It's kind of like backyard baseball or Super Mario baseball, or Super Mario Sluggers, excuse me. I never played Super Mario baseball. I'm not that old. I wasn't on the Super Nintendos. But when you played those games, you would start out with a pretty crummy team, and you would beat a team, and you would get to pick someone from that team to pull them onto your team. And with each passing game, you got to pull someone better. Like you started with Toad, and then you eventually got to Yoshi, and then you got to Princess Peach and Donkey Kong, and then you would play Bowser in the final, and you get Bowser, and you could use Bowser in the exhibition games and make a custom team. That's the kind of food chain we're talking about here, where you went from LA, who I think is underrated when we're talking about talent, because Kempe and Fiala might be the two most underrated players in the entire league. It's just we live in an East Coast centric landscape where time zones make it that I'm not going to stay up to watch the Kings if I'm already watching the Oilers. And if the Kings are on a night the Oilers aren't, there might be another game I'm more inclined to watch. But those two guys are really good. Doughty is still an above average, I would probably say like a top 25, 30 defenseman in the league. You throw Byfield in there. But you go a level up when you're playing Vegas. You got Stone, you got Eichel, Tomas Hertl, Hannafin, Pietrangelo, Theodore. You went up a level, and Vegas's depth. You talk about Adorfiev, who had 30 in the regular season, Victor Olofsson, who had a couple goals earlier in this series, Ivan Barbashev and Brett Howden, who have big goals in the playoffs on their ledgers as well. And to the Oilers' credit, in spite of the fact that Connor and Leon aren't going for 4 points a game combined anymore, the Oilers are still in these games. And not only are they winning them, they are controlling them, except for game 3. And they are dominating in stretches. And when you consistently make the other team play defense, good things are going to happen. And the more good results you can string together shift after shift, it creates a downhill effect. And what we were talking about in the second segment, the idea that Vegas was overthinking it, looking for that perfect shot to try and fracture Skinner's confidence. It's the same thing on the inverse. The Oilers get that first goal and the crowd's into it. Building was incredibly loud on TV. If you went to the game tonight and you're listening, kudos to you, pat on the back. It was really loud on TV tonight in a way that I wouldn't say it was in game 3. And part of it was the crowd knew they had a responsibility. They had a role to play in this game. And I'm very fickle or skeptical at times of my belief in how much crowd matters. But in a game like this, where Skinner, you're walking on eggshells, like we said in that opening segment, the relationship, we know that it's got to end, but we got to have the one big fight to make sure we're done. And but we're still in the relationship. We didn't break up. We're still here. We're up 3-1. We have a golden opportunity to end this series in 5 games against a Vegas team that is going to come with the kitchen sink. And Vegas burned so much capital in game 3 to win that game. And of course you had to do it. You would have been down 3-0 if you didn't go all out kitchen sink in game 3 to pull that comeback off. But you are tired. I have no qualms about saying Vegas looks tired. Jack Eichel looks tired. Pietrangelo, he's hurt and he's tired. Frankly, Adin Hill has been bad in these playoffs, and you saw that getting to him a little bit tonight. His insistence on the shenanigans, on slashing guys, on trying to get into scrums after whistles. You can say, oh, he's a competitor. He's trying. Goalies who are locked in aren't in on the shenanigans. If you're dialed in, you're worried about winning the game. It's why the Tom Wilson stuff always mystifies me, because the Capitals don't win because Tom Wilson's a pain. They win because he makes good hockey plays. When he's doing the between the whistle stuff and carrying on with Josh Anderson, rolling around on the benches and making fun of the storm surge, you're losing the game 3-1, Tom. Maybe you worry about winning the game as opposed to trying to upset guys on the other team. It's the same thing for Adin Hill. If you were really that good, maybe you would make a save instead of trying to fight people, instead of trying to slash people and goad them into taking penalties. The Oilers have Vegas on the ropes here. You close this out in 5 games, and you get to kick back for a few days, and you get to watch the Stars and the Jets beat the crap out of each other for a few more games. That's where you want to be. And I'll wrap up on this thought. Teams that win the Stanley Cup, they usually do it in 23, 22 games. Anything more than that, you start to run the risk of burnout. And last year, the Oilers lost Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final in 25. 22 is the sweet spot. 23 is the sweet spot. And that means you're going to have 1 or 2 series, at least 1, if not definitely 2, that are only going to be 5 or 6 games. I don't expect the Oilers to have as easy of a time on Wednesday night, but I do think the Oilers have the capacity to make this happen. And I think Vegas has really shown some flaws that I did not see. And I was not as in tune with as I thought. And Chris said on the preview show we did, the crossover show that aired last Monday, Vegas's defense is not as good as I thought it was. And hand up, I couldn't be gladder to be wrong. But that will do it for today's Victory Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. Oilers fans, feel good about that. Job's not finished. Word to the late Kobe Bryant. Job's not finished. Feel good about that. Celebrate that. Where were you for the Adam Henrique 2-goal game, Stuart Skinner shutout game? That's one you will remember. Thank you so much to everyone who made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, please be sure to check out Locked On NHL or Locked On NHL Game Night. I will talk to you guys tomorrow Until then, let's go Oilers. Oh, and of course, be sure to subscribe to Locked On Oilers wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube.